Yo guys, what is up? Welcome back to another episode of Marijuana SA Weekly, and today we are talking about grow room installations and grow systems. We recently dropped a video about a grow installation, and we thought we would elaborate on some of the questions that you guys asked within the comments. Of course, Dean's here to answer all the technical T's and C's. How you doing, Dean?
Yeah, super well shot, Andy. Once again, really excited about this episode. You know, we've been leveraging the sort of the grow room kind of content quite a bit recently. We've been privileged to go into quite a few spaces and do some consulting and work. So yeah, I just wanted to elaborate a little bit on some of the sort of common maybe misconceptions that people have, especially for first timers when they starting to enter into the space. It can get expensive, and it's I think there's some really interesting little tidbits of information we're going to learn throughout this episode.
Well, we're very much looking forward to it. And on that note, I think you mentioned the big ticket word that everyone's already worried about is the expense side of it / investment side of it. Where is exactly like the biggest component of a grow system falling?
So a lot of the time it really falls into, you need to grow quality in a space, and your cap in the grow room or indoors a lot of the time or is going to be the amount of power that you're putting onto those plants. So when you're looking at the costings of your grow room or the investment into your grow room, a majority of that is definitely going to go into your lights. A lot of people will come to us and say, I want to get a budget light and I'll just use the best genetics, and then I'll make do with that. I don't need a quality light. That's, for me, the wrong way of thinking. I would rather go for the best light you can possibly afford, and then sort of build up on the rest of the equipment as you go. And also, with getting a quality light, that you're going to get what's advertised. You're not buying 1,000 watt and then it turns out to be an 80 watt or something like that. We see that a lot of the time. And then it's also going to last the period. If the light breaks after 3 months of usage and there's no warranty on it, and now you're kind of stuck in the deep end, wasn't really worth it to skimp out on that side. So just as a sort of a little bit of a thumb suck, generally about maybe 55 to 65% of your investment in the setup of a grow space is going to go to your lighting, and then the other sort of the rest of the percentage, the 35% kind of covers the rest of the stuff.
And I mean that applies both hydroponic and just like a soil medium grow, right?
Yeah, most spaces, most spaces is going to be about that. Like I said, though, it's a thumb suck, so don't hold me up at gunpoint to the math there. Yeah, but it is a nice rule of thumb.
And I mean, obviously, like a system, right, is pretty simple. There's quite a few there's a few components, but I mean, most systems are like systematically the same. There's a light, there's a bit of there's genetics, there's a medium, but like, where do you find that people sort of like, what aspects do they overlook or tend to like neglect often?
So a lot of the time I actually see this, a lot of the time when people sort of send through what they have available and they start asking a bit of questions, funny enough, most of the time, a lot of people won't have thought about ventilation at all. So they've got all the bells and whistles, they've got a good light, they've got a space set up, and then it's just like completely sealed, and I'm like, where's the air coming from? And it sounds weird to say, but like, it's happened so many times that it's actually become like a little bit of a, expectation for us to start to consult on the ventilation. And it's investing into quality lighting is obviously super important, but having enough air movement is as important as having the lighting, and it forms sort of one of the three pillars of the space, if we're going to put it like that. You've got to have good light, you've got to have ventilation, and then you've got to have your space set up nicely. So ventilation is, or air movement, we can put it, is for me the most overlooked. And that's a two-pronged kind of thing, You've got to have your fresh air coming in, your old air going out, and then you also have to have your air movement within the space. The fresh air going in and old air going out keeps your space sort of regulated. It stops you getting sort of humidity buildups and stuff like that. And then your air moving around will also help with sort of making sure there's fresh air everywhere, but it's also going to sort of form the function of strengthening up the plant. If you have no air movement inside the space, you're going to end up with super weak plants. If you have super weak plants, they're not going to be able to hold sort of heavy colas, and then the plant itself naturally actually won't want to produce heavy dense nugs because it's just physically going to kill itself. So don't overlook the ventilation. We need air to breathe. Animals need air to breathe, and so do plants. So ventilation is that sort of big overlooked one in the space.
Yeah, no, I can I can easily see how it's overlooked because it's, I mean, personally, when you're starting out, it's not the big fan, like it's not the glamorous side of growing, it's just like, oh, it's just a fan. But it's like, it really packs a punch when you get it right. And it really does the contrary when you get it wrong. And moving on, so you've got a lot of, prospective growers watching this and obviously thinking about where they would get started. And let's say they have got a little system going. What do you find like most people get sort of stuck with? I mean, the hiccups. I mean, most of it's pretty straightforward. Hang the light, put it at a certain height, but there's obviously some things that are always going to pop up.
Yeah, so on this point, a lot of guys are really, really like the main concern people are worrying about is, well, how much nutrients must I give this plant? When must I feed? How much? What strength? So a lot of the guys who are sort of in their early stages of growth or of running a system, they really start to obsess quite hard around the nutrients and feeding of the nutrients and maximizing the nutrients and buying all the products to feed this plant. And if you actually look at it carefully, all of those points is actually going to be negative. If you're a brand new grower, you're growing for the first time, you've got this brand new space, I would worry far more about the other aspects first, rather than thinking about, what's this plethora of products that I can buy in order to feed this plant. I mean, don't get me wrong, I love using nutrients. It's definitely an important part of it. In a hydroponic system, you can't do without it, but it's not the be all and end all. A majority of the substrates that are on the market, I mean, when we've done content on this in the past, testing them, they're so jam-packed with nutrients, you technically can get through a grow with just a bag of soil, a seed, and the system, so now all of a sudden you're worrying so much about nutrients, what to feed where, 10 different bottles in one bottle, and your pH is flying all over the place. You don't even know about pH yet.
Hormones.
So it's not exactly, getting too much hormones causing your plant to hermy, spraying the wrong stuff on. So it's a very exciting part, and you definitely can push your grow with the right additives and amendments and nutrients. But for me to sort of, if I'm dealing someone who's early on their grow and they're asking sort of what we would suggest, I like to keep it to the base as possible. If they're doing an organic system, a lot of the time we'll just offer them some worm tea and some molasses, or maybe if they want to go for a bottle nut, maybe sort of the base range of Umya or the Grow and Bloom from BioBizz. But I don't really want to go much more complicated than that, because more products equals more complications equals more room for error, So get through that first grow with the absolute base. You're not going to grow the premium grade your first time anyway. It's going to be a steep learning curve. So just go with the basics, start off with the basics, get to know the light on and off, the ventilation, the humidities, and then once you kind of have an idea of what you're doing, then go and delve deeper into the nutrients. But for me, it's really not the first thing that I'm going to worry about. But obviously, for the sake of this conversation and from our learnings, it is something that a lot of new time growers are worried about. And I would say, it's really, it's not the main point to worry about in the early days.
It's kind of one of those things that like often you'll find like less is more. You go into Builder's Warehouse or something like that, and you go to the gardening section and you like check the wall of nutrients, and it's like this like massive wall of like, 20 meters long of just like different bottles and Roundup and every type of thing. But it's like, you got to remember that's all catered for, like the entire, spectrum of gardening. Whereas like if you actually narrow it down to what you would need for cannabis, it is slightly less, and there is like a simple formula to it. So anyway, moving on. So now you've got your stuff going, you've got your plants, you've got your very simple feeding regime planned out. As you were saying, you're probably not going to get it right on the first time. What are you kind of looking at as a bit of an introduction learning curve time frame?
So I've actually got down quite nicely, because I've had this conversation multiple times with people when we're chatting about the sort of the learning curve. And for me, I like to say this is in order to understand the system that you're running, it's going to take you 3 full cycles. So your first grow or your first cycle is going to be a little bit of a disappointment. You learning the system for the first time, you probably using the genetics for the first time, you're probably using the nutrients for the first time, everything's new. So the room for error is massive, and also you don't quite know yet. So if you're looking at something and there's a problem, you can't physically see it because you don't know what a problem is and what a problem isn't, So the first grow is the learning curve. The second grow comes in, and now you've had made the base issues, you kind of start to see a little bit more problems here and there, how to now treat them. So the second grow comes out and you get good results, but they're not quite the results that you want. And now we've been growing for around, 8 months, and 8 months is quite a long time. You've been doing it in practice, so you've learned a lot. And now this third grow comes along, and a lot of the time, if you've put in the effort to learn and you've really tried hard throughout this period, the third grow is where you're going to start to see some kind of results that you're going to be pleased with. And, I've seen this over the last couple of years multiple times, and it really does take around that period. If you're going to really push it hard and watch the YouTube videos and scour through the internet and do the learnings and do the trial and error, the learning curve might be a little bit faster. But once again, as kind of a rule of thumb, I would say it's going to take you 3 full cycles with your system before you go and before you're kind of getting the results that you want. And also you might be lacking a little bit of equipment here or there. So during that period, you've maybe picked up a few new pieces of equipment, or, got your IPM under control, and you finally reach a point that you get quite happy. So what I like to say is, don't go after the first grow and sort of rehaul your whole system completely, because then you sort of back at the base again. Even experienced growers with a brand new grow room, the first grow, you're ironing out issues and trying to find out what's wrong and why this is air leak here or whatever, so even the most experienced growers have a little bit of a learning curve in a new space. So stick with the system that you have for a good couple of grows before you go and rehaul everything, because it's just going to sort of, you might have better equipment, but now you're going to be back learning once again how to optimize that equipment correctly.
I might also add that having just like a standardized sort of genetic throughout that initial period, unless it's like really a genetic that's letting you down, like have a nice standard one, just so that you can like not worry about too many variations, because each genetic's going to have different results and tolerances and such. So anyway, Dean, in closing, any final pieces of advice, anything that you want to just that you're maybe dealing with at the moment, or something that's really impacted your grows?
So I think my final piece of advice is going to be, when you're growing and you're learning to grow, and you're following the sort of the information that you're receiving, it can seem like it's a lot of work, which it can be. But if you stick with it and you put the effort in, you're definitely going to get the end results. But it's also about not giving up. There's a lot of disappointment when cultivating, even once again for experienced growers. So if you want to grow and you want to grow the dank, you definitely have to be resilient. So the only real piece of advice I can give is don't give up. If you put the time and effort in, you will eventually get the results that you want. But as with anything, you're not going to get them immediately. You can kind of think of growing as like a brand new sport. You're playing playing the sport for the first time, and you're not going to be in the World Cup the first time. You know, you're going to be playing at your local club in the beginners class. So don't give up, and you'll eventually get the results that you want.
Yeah, guys, it'll always be worth it down the line. And yeah, guys, on that, thanks so much for listening all the way to the end. I'd really appreciate it if you guys left any comments on like any tips that you guys want to share, because a lot of people will watch this and they'll also go and look down there and see what else everyone else is, tips are. So guys, and until next week, thanks so much for watching. Peace, guys.